When we talk about walking for 30 minutes a day, it sounds almost too simple to matter in a world obsessed with extremes. Extreme workouts, extreme diets, extreme transformations. Yet the human body has never been built for extremes as a daily requirement. It has been built for rhythm, for repetition, for movement that feels almost ordinary. Walking fits into that design so quietly that we often underestimate what it sets in motion beneath the skin. To understand what happens to your fat cells when you walk for half an hour each day, you have to stop thinking of fat as an enemy and start seeing it as living tissue, responsive, adaptive, and deeply connected to how you move through your life. Most people grow up believing that fat is something inert, something that simply sits there, weighing the body down and waiting to be eliminated. This belief shapes how people treat their bodies, often with frustration and force. But fat cells are not silent passengers. They are alive, intelligent in their own biological way, constantly listening to signals coming from the nervous system, hormones, blood flow, and daily behavior. When a person begins to walk regularly, especially for something as modest as 30 minutes a day, the body does not interpret this as a threat. Instead, it registers it as a pattern, and fat cells respond very differently to patterns than they do to emergencies. Fat tissue exists to protect survival. It stores energy when times are abundant so it can be released when movement, effort, or scarcity requires it. In modern life, where stress is high and movement is low, fat cells often receive conflicting messages. They are flooded with stress hormones, irregular eating signals, and long periods of inactivity. Under those conditions, fat cells become defensive. They hold on to energy tightly, not because they are stubborn, but because the body feels unpredictable. Walking changes that emotional climate at a biological level. It introduces regularity, and regularity is something fat cells understand. When you walk, muscles begin contracting rhythmically, and that rhythm sends a calm demand for energy. This demand is not aggressive. It does not scream for fuel. It whispers. Hormones that encourage fat release rise gently, enough to open the door without triggering alarm. Inside fat cells, stored triglycerides begin to separate into usable components. This process is orderly and controlled, allowing energy to flow out steadily rather than all at once. Fat cells are not being attacked, they are being invited to participate. Over time, fat cells notice this repeated invitation. They learn that energy will be needed again tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. This expectation changes their behavior. Instead of guarding every stored molecule, they become more flexible. They release energy more easily and they store less aggressively. This is a profound shift because flexibility is the foundation of metabolic health. Rigid fat cells are often inflamed and resistant. Flexible fat cells are calm and cooperative. Walking also improves communication between fat cells and the rest of the body. Increased blood flow allows hormones and nutrients to move more efficiently through fat tissue. Oxygen delivery improves. Waste products are removed more effectively. In this healthier environment, fat cells reduce the production of inflammatory signals that interfere with metabolism. Inflammation is often what makes fat feel like an enemy. But when inflammation quiets, fat becomes simply another tissue doing its job. Another subtle change occurs at the level of gene expression. Fat cells respond to repeated movement by adjusting which internal instructions they prioritize. Genes associated with energy release become more active, while those linked to chronic storage and inflammation become less dominant. This does not require extreme effort. It requires repetition. Walking provides that repetition without overwhelming the system. Perhaps the most important shift happens in how the body interprets safety. Chronic stress tells fat cells that danger is near, encouraging them to hold on to energy. Walking, especially when done in a calm state, lowers stress hormones and signals safety. In a safer internal environment, fat cells loosen their grip. They no longer need to protect the body against imagined scarcity. They can afford to share what they store. This understanding changes how we approach health. Instead of battling fat, walking teaches cooperation. Fat cells stop being treated as unwanted guests and start being recognized as responsive partners. Over time, their size decreases, their function improves, and their impact on overall health becomes less harmful. This process does not rely on willpower or punishment. It relies on communication. When you walk consistently, you are not forcing fat to disappear. You are teaching fat cells how to behave differently. You are restoring a conversation that has been disrupted by modern stillness and chronic stress. In that conversation, fat cells listen, adapt, and respond with remarkable intelligence, proving that lasting change comes not from aggression, but from understanding and rhythm. The human body is deeply sensitive to how energy is demanded from it, and there is a crucial difference between being asked to work and being forced to perform. When movement becomes urgent and extreme, the body interprets it as a short-term crisis. In those moments, fat cells often retreat into protection, conserving energy for what feels like an unpredictable future. Walking for 30 minutes a day sends a completely different message. It tells the body that energy will be needed, but not all at once, and not in a way that threatens survival. This distinction changes everything about how fat is used. At the beginning of a walk, the body reaches for the most accessible fuel. Circulating glucose supplies the initial energy, allowing movement to feel easy rather than strained. As the minutes pass, muscles continue contracting in a steady rhythm, and that rhythm creates a gentle but persistent demand. Hormones that support fat release rise just enough to encourage cooperation. Fat cells begin to open their stores without panic, releasing fatty acids into the bloodstream at a pace that matches the effort being made. This slow shift toward fat usage is one of the most elegant features of walking. It does not rely on exhaustion or oxygen deprivation. It relies on time. As the body settles into motion, fat becomes a practical fuel source rather than an emergency reserve. Muscles burn fatty acids efficiently when the pace is moderate, allowing energy production to continue smoothly without dramatic spikes in heart rate or stress hormones. What makes this process sustainable is that it avoids urgency. Urgency triggers defense. Defense leads to resistance. Walking avoids both. The body recognizes that the movement is repeatable, and that recognition encourages metabolic trust. Fat cells release energy knowing that they will not be drained recklessly. They are not being emptied, they are being used. Over days and weeks, this pattern reshapes metabolic preference. The body becomes more comfortable relying on fat during activity, and that comfort carries over into rest. Mitochondria adapt by improving their ability to burn fat efficiently. This adaptation means that fat is not only used during the walk, but also becomes a more accessible energy source throughout the day. Fat cells respond to this increased demand by maintaining a steady flow rather than hoarding. This shift matters because it separates fat loss from desperation. Many people associate fat loss with suffering, believing that only extreme effort produces results. In reality, extreme effort often teaches the body to protect itself. Walking teaches the opposite lesson. It shows the body that energy will be needed regularly and responsibly. That lesson reduces the biological impulse to cling to stored fat. There is also a hormonal calm that accompanies this kind of movement. Stress hormones remain low, and insulin functions more effectively. When insulin sensitivity improves, the body is less likely to shuttle excess energy into fat cells. Instead, muscles absorb more glucose, reducing the pressure on fat storage. Fat cells are spared the constant cycle of forced storage followed by forced release. Instead, they participate in a balanced exchange. As walking becomes habitual, appetite often adjusts naturally. The body learns to match intake with expenditure without conscious restriction. This alignment further supports fat usage without urgency. Fat cells are not overwhelmed by sudden surpluses or sudden deficits. They exist in a steady state that favors gradual change. The brilliance of walking lies in its respect for time. It allows biological systems to adapt at their own pace. Fat usage increases not because the body is cornered, but because it is guided. The metabolism shifts toward efficiency rather than survival mode. This is why walking can feel deceptively simple while producing meaningful change beneath the surface. When energy is demanded calmly, the body responds calmly. Fat becomes fuel instead of fear. The shift away from urgency creates a metabolic environment where fat loss is not a fight, but a consequence of alignment between movement, hormones, and time. The body does not change most effectively under pressure. It changes under repetition. This truth becomes clear when we observe how fat cells respond to consistent walking compared to occasional bursts of intense effort. Intensity can create dramatic short-term effects, but it often leaves the body uncertain about what comes next. Consistency, on the other hand, creates familiarity. When walking becomes a daily practice, fat cells begin to recognize a pattern, and patterns are what biological systems trust. Each walk sends a modest signal that energy will be needed. This signal is not strong enough to alarm the system, but it is strong enough to matter. Fat cells respond by releasing small amounts of stored energy, and when this happens repeatedly, they begin to adapt. They no longer behave as if energy must be guarded at all costs. Instead, they anticipate usage. This anticipation is what transforms fat tissue from a defensive reserve into an active contributor to movement. Blood flow improves with regular walking, and this change reaches deep into fat tissue. Better circulation allows hormones to reach fat cells more efficiently, and allows waste products to be removed more effectively. In this healthier environment, fat cells reduce inflammatory signaling, which is often responsible for metabolic resistance. As inflammation quiets, fat cells become more responsive to cues that encourage energy release. Consistency also influences fat cells at a molecular level. Repeated movement encourages shifts in gene expression that favor fat oxidation over storage. These shifts are subtle but cumulative. Over time, fat cells prioritize functions that support energy balance rather than excess accumulation. This is not the result of a single intense workout, but the accumulation of many ordinary walks. Insulin sensitivity improves as walking becomes habitual. Muscles become more effective at absorbing glucose, reducing the need for fat cells to store excess energy. This change alters the daily flow of nutrients, making fat storage less frequent and fat usage more common. Fat cells experience fewer spikes of forced storage, allowing them to maintain a healthier size and function. As fat cells gradually shrink through repeated energy release, their behavior changes. Smaller fat cells are less inflammatory and more metabolically active. They communicate more effectively with the rest of the body and respond more readily to hormonal signals. This improvement often occurs before noticeable weight loss, reflecting a deeper shift in tissue health rather than superficial change. Consistency also reshapes the body's relationship with stress. Walking regularly lowers baseline stress levels, reducing the hormonal signals that encourage fat retention. In a calmer internal environment, fat cells no longer feel compelled to protect stored energy. They become participants in a system that feels stable rather than threatened. The power of walking lies in its predictability. It teaches the body what to expect and when to expect it. Fat cells thrive under this predictability, adjusting their behavior to support movement rather than resist it. Over time, this steady cooperation produces changes that intensity alone cannot sustain. Chronic stress quietly shapes the way fat behaves in the body, often more powerfully than food choices or exercise intensity. When stress becomes a constant presence, the nervous system remains on alert, releasing hormones that prepare the body for danger. One of these hormones encourages fat cells to store energy, especially around the abdomen, as a protective response. In this state, fat is not a cosmetic issue, but a biological shield. Walking begins to dismantle this shield not through force, but through reassurance. As the body moves at a comfortable pace, the nervous system shifts out of constant vigilance. Breathing deepens, muscles relax between steps, and the brain receives signals that the environment is safe enough for sustained movement. This transition lowers the release of stress hormones that tell fat cells to hold on tightly. Without those signals, fat cells begin to soften their defensive stance. Walking also reduces inflammation, which often travels alongside chronic stress. Inflammatory signals interfere with insulin sensitivity and disrupt communication between tissues. Fat cells in an inflamed environment behave rigidly, releasing energy reluctantly. Regular walking improves circulation and oxygen delivery, creating conditions where inflammation gradually subsides. As inflammation decreases, fat cells become more responsive and metabolically flexible. This change in the internal environment alters how energy is managed. With stress hormones reduced, insulin can function more effectively, directing nutrients toward muscles rather than fat storage. Fat cells receive fewer commands to store and more opportunities to release. This balance supports gradual fat reduction without triggering alarm. The calming effect of walking extends beyond the physical. Mental stress often drives patterns of eating that overwhelm fat cells with excess energy. As walking improves mood and emotional regulation, these patterns often ease naturally. Fat cells are spared sudden surges of intake followed by guilt-driven restriction. Instead, energy intake and use begin to align more closely. Sleep quality often improves with regular walking, and sleep is a powerful regulator of fat metabolism. Poor sleep elevates stress hormones and increases hunger signals, both of which encourage fat storage. Better sleep restores hormonal balance, reinforcing the calming effects of walking. Fat cells respond to this stability by releasing energy more willingly. Over time, this reduction in stress reshapes fat tissue itself. Fat cells shrink gradually, becoming less inflammatory and more sensitive to hormonal cues. They no longer operate as emergency reserves, but as dynamic energy stores. This transformation does not require exhaustion or deprivation. It emerges from a calmer relationship with movement. Walking teaches the body that movement does not equal danger. By lowering stress and inflammation, it removes the signals that lock fat in place. In this environment of safety and balance, fat loss becomes a natural response rather than a struggle. Many people measure progress only by what they can see or weigh, yet the most important changes often occur long before the mirror reflects them. When walking becomes a daily habit, the body begins adjusting in ways that are invisible but deeply meaningful. Fat tissue responds first at a functional level, improving its behavior before its size noticeably changes. This is why health markers often improve even when weight seems stubborn. One of the earliest changes occurs in visceral fat, the fat stored around internal organs. This type of fat is highly active and sensitive to movement. Regular walking encourages visceral fat to release energy more readily than surface fat, reducing its influence on inflammation and metabolic disruption. As visceral fat decreases, organs function more efficiently, and the risk of metabolic disease begins to decline. At the same time, insulin sensitivity improves. Muscles become more effective at absorbing glucose, reducing the need for the body to store excess energy as fat. This shift stabilizes blood sugar levels and lowers strain on fat cells. Even without visible weight loss, this internal balance signals improved metabolic health. Walking also enhances circulation throughout the body, including within fat tissue. Better blood flow allows hormones to communicate more clearly and waste products to be removed more efficiently. Fat cells in this environment become healthier, less inflamed, and more responsive to energy demands. These changes reduce the metabolic resistance that often frustrates people seeking visible results. Sleep and appetite regulation often improve as well. Walking supports natural circadian rhythms, helping the body rest more deeply at night. Better sleep stabilizes hunger hormones, reducing erratic appetite and cravings. Fat cells are no longer overwhelmed by unpredictable surges of intake, allowing them to release stored energy more consistently. Inflammation continues to decrease as walking remains consistent. Lower inflammation improves joint comfort, energy levels, and overall well-being. These improvements make movement easier and more enjoyable, reinforcing the habit. Fat loss becomes part of a positive feedback loop rather than a constant struggle. The absence of dramatic external change can be misleading. Internally, the body is reorganizing how it uses energy, stores fuel, and responds to stress. Fat cells shrink gradually and become more metabolically active. Muscles grow more efficient. Hormonal signals align. These shifts create a foundation for lasting change. When visible weight loss eventually appears, it rests on a system that is already healthier and more balanced. Walking builds this foundation quietly, improving health long before appearance catches up. This quiet progress is often the most reliable sign that the body is moving in the right direction. In the end, walking is less about changing the body and more about reminding it of something it already knows. Fat cells remember movement. They remember balance. They respond when the body moves with intention and care. 30 minutes a day is enough to awaken that memory, step by step, breath by breath, in a way that honors both science and the quiet wisdom of the human body.